There are over 100,000 arachnids in the world. Some of them look absolutely horrible. From acid-spraying giants that lurk under rocks to tiny skittering creatures that few humans have ever laid eyes on. As we delve into all 13 arachnid groups, you're gonna see they only get weirder and weirder. There's even a new secret group that I bet you didn't even know were arachnids in the first place. But before we get to that one, we need to look at the arachnid you're probably most familiar with. Spiders might not be the weirdest arachnid, but they are among the most successful arachnids. With over 50,000 species worldwide, these guys have conquered every continent except Antarctica. And because they're so common, they encounter humans a lot. In fact, even though spiders aren't the only arachnid, when people talk about having arachnophobia, it's usually a fear of spiders, not all arachnids. And even the name arachnid comes from the Greek word for spider. So spiders are kind of a great place to start. They're sort of the basic arachnid build, too. All arachnids have 2 body segments, 8 legs, 2 pedipalps, and 2 chelicerae, which are all very obvious and very identifiable on a spider. Run in the opposite direction, you'll see they have a cephalothorax, also known as a prosoma, where the legs and all the creepy bits are housed, and an abdomen or opistosoma, which is where a lot of their organs tend to live, which allow them to spin their characteristic webs. So this is what allows these animals to think in their very simple, primitive way. All spiders have 8 legs, unless they had an encounter with a predator, but they're all born with 8 legs, and those legs are not very specialized. They're just kind of basic moving legs. But those front 2 are actually called pedipalps. So as we get deeper into the weird arachnid groups, you'll see some ways they push pedipalps to insane extremes, basically just feelers. They act kind of like the antennae of insects, is where it gets really interesting. These are the spider's fangs, but their fangs are actually called chelicerae. These claw-like mouthparts are characteristic of the larger group that arachnids belong to, Chelicerata. And as we're going to see as we go down this list, chelicerae come in a lot of different configurations. In the case of the spiders, this is the folding knife configuration. Spiders have evolved chelicerae that are hollow. The knife part of their folding knife chelicerae is a chitinous needle designed for piercing hard exoskeletons and injecting that neurotoxic venom. Just like how there are arachnids that push the biology of pedipalps to the next level multiple times in the arachnid clade, and each venomous arachnid, and it gets weirder and weirder as we go. In this next group is our first step down that bizarre rabbit hole. The mites are basically everywhere. They're out in nature in basically every habitat you could think of, either eating other things that eat the decaying material. Right now, you have dust mites on your couch and in your bed. You have mites living on your face. Mites that look absolutely horrible. We only have about 30,000 described species of mites, but it's suspected. Don't ask me how we make that estimate. I don't actually know. But mites are kind of a catch-all group of small, weird arachnids. There are some morphological characteristics that they share, but there might be more diversity within mites. You have everything from large predatory velvet mites that hunt on the bark of trees to tiny parasitic mites. But despite how weird and creepy they are arachnids for the ecosystem, breaking down decaying material, serving as predators for weird invertebrate groups, and despite how horrible they look, they may be weird, but they're super. This next one is also super common, and hey, shouldn't this be back in the spider section? The harvestmen from the order Opiliones are actually their own group of arachnids. Warts with long, spindly legs, the amazing world of the harvestmen. First of all, it's pretty difficult to find the split between the prosoma and the opistosoma on a harvestman. These guys are bizarre looking, and because of how odd looking they are, that's sort of how a lot of the myths about them came to be. Certain parts of the US and other parts of the world, and many people grow up hearing the daddy longlegs, but its fangs are so small that it can't actually bite you. Daddy longlegs aren't spiders. They're only spiders if all arachnids are spiders, which is not true. They're venom-injecting anatomy. If we look at their actual anatomy, their pedipalps and chelicerae are kind of bunched up, and they look bizarre as heck under a microscope. But their pedipalps pedipalps, and they're meant for kind of scraping debris off the ground. Most harvestmen and their chelicerae, there are not venom-injecting fangs like the spiders. They're food and pulling it towards the mouth. Some harvestmen can emit, there isn't any evidence that that's particularly toxic. It's just noxious. There is one group of harvestmen that are not detrivores at all. These armored predatory harvestmen look all of the arachnids. Some of the species from South America look like something straight out of Dark Souls, with their bizarre coloration and their crazy thorns and claw-like pedipalps in the front, but use those claws and stuff to eat small invertebrates. Even the most predatory harvestmen are still not venomous. This next arachnid actually is dangerous. In fact, it's the most dangerous arachnid in the world. This is the tick. But because of the way they eat. See, ticks are creepy looking. How much you hate spiders. Ticks are worse. And I say that as somebody who works with arachnids all the time. They're creepy. They freak me out when they're on me. I hate them. Ticks absolutely suck. When they find a host, whether it's a mammal, a reptile, or a bird, and dig in with these modified chelicerae that are almost kind of like drills. Now, the reason this is dangerous is because our host to harmful pathogens finish feeding on the infected host. I got a lot of comments about ticks on my recent dangerous insects video asking, hey, where are ticks? Or, arthropods. But they're actually not insects. Our larger group containing lots of things like crustaceans, insects, and arachnids. Arachnids, they haven't shared an ancestor in hundreds of millions of years. And the only thing they share is the fact that they're arthropods. So ticks aren't only bad because they transmit diseases. Ticks have other. In parts of Australia, there is what is known as the paralysis tick because it's saliva. Yeah, a tick that is venomous. But the crazy thing about ticks is they're not the only one in their groups. And I actually think there are some really cool members of Parasitiformes that are not ticks. These crazy mite-like predators that stalk in the decaying layer of plant material underneath leaf litter. These things look bizarre. We think of ticks when we think of Parasitiformes. There seems to be a theme with arachnids feeding on other animals, whether it's as a parasite. But one of the most terrifying arachnid predators has to be the scorpion. These things are just metal. They haven't changed much at all, and this animal is actually older than trees. So they're doing something right. The scorpions are also our next venomous group of arachnid in a totally different way than the spiders. Even more basic and uniform than spiders. Look a little different. They look kind of creepy. Those offset crab-like pincers. They look terrible, but those aren't the venom-injecting tools. It's not their claws either. These are the first ones that really take pedipalps to the next level. Not only serve to feel the environment, but they're also a weapon for grabbing onto prey. We look further back along the scorpion's body, armed with a chitinous barbs. And these guys, they don't bite, they sting in the arthropod world. Here in the US, we have things like the Arizona bark scorpion. They put you into cardiac arrest if you have a severe reaction. The deserts of the Middle East, the thick-tailed scorpions in the genus Titius possess cardiotoxins, and can leave you gasping for air as you die a painful death. In the Middle East, you have deathstalkers, the most potent scorpions in the world. Freaking insane. In Iraq and Iran, there's one group of scorpions called Hemiscorpius, and particularly a species Hemiscorpius lepturus, but it's part of its own family. These guys they kill you by causing your organs while they're still inside you. And while I can't find reports of what the symptoms feel like if you're stung by this thing, scorpion, and it's probably why they're among the most successful arachnids in the world and they're amazingly effective at subduing their insect prey. Now this next one looks a lot like a scorpion, so you'd probably wonder, right? Sort of, but not really. These guys are called the pseudoscorpions because the only thing they're missing is that long segmented tail. So you'd probably be like, okay, well, where is their venom? Remember I said that arachnids seem to have evolved venom in totally different ways? Spiders have venomous chelicerae. Scorpions have venomous tails. Pseudoscorpions have venomous pedipalps. Yeah, those big pincers, they're not just scary for grabbing onto prey, they are venom-injecting tools. They're tiny. As far as we know, they're not venomous enough to hurt people because the biggest pseudoscorpions are smaller than a pencil eraser. Most of them, they're hiding in that decaying layer of plant material underneath leaflets, but they're kind of just hidden in these tucked away spots where it stays moist. All that retaining water if they're exposed to heat and sun, want to hide in the shadows and stay out of the way where they go. So these guys are super cool because, like mites, they're kind of everywhere. They'll hitch rides on houseflies to get places, and because of all the time. So if you're interested in discovering a new species, as we work our way into more obscure arachnids, we also work our way into more tropical environments, and that is where we find the tailless whip scorpions. These guys are probably one of the coolest looking arachnids in the world. I mean, they just look metal. They're covered in spines, and because they just look like they're not of this world. And I've said that before in whip scorpion videos, because despite their name though, some people despite their bizarre scorpion-like appearance, bigger clade within arachnids that contain. But tailless whip scorpions or amblypygids are super prey. These guys are wicked ambush hunters. It is with their whips that come out and are always sweeping when they're out hunting after dark. And that's not totally wrong, but they're actually legs. Turns out they've foregone the antennae of insects into sensory organs. That is what happened, and they basically have what we call antennae-form leg. And in the dark, this very tiny, faint leg, as it brushes over its thorax, you might just think, oh, it's just a piece of grass or something. But it'll tell the whip scorpion exactly where its prey is. And these guys, they might look like they don't move much when they're just sitting there, but they're lightning fast, jumping onto their prey and reaching out with those terrifying looking claws in the front. Like true scorpions, those claws are their pedipalps. They grab on, that insect is not getting away with it, eating the insect piece by piece. Totally gnarly. One of my favorite arachnids, hands down. It doesn't get any cooler than that. The tailless whip scorpions are kind of your false whip scorpions. These guys are the true whip scorpions, the vinegaroons. Like you took a tailless whip scorpion and a lobster, mixed them together, and made it into one bizarre creature. In little pockets where they hide underneath rocks and logs, coming out only at night to hunt for prey. But they're not quite as long and whip-like. They look more just like longer legs. Is their tail. Their tail double, and you can see their tail is lined with tons and tons of hair. The direction of their body, it's very difficult to get the jump on these guys because you can't sneak around back. They'll just whip around and grab you as the amblypygids. But they don't need to be, because if you disturb them, at the base of that tail is a series of glands that spread and caprylic acid accurately at your face. When they spray, it smells sharply of vinegar. Technically non-toxic, though I don't really know if you'd want to. Vinegar is like 5% acetic acid, and trust me when I say this, if that gets in a cut like you would not believe. It's actually kind of impressive. What's also really interesting is arachnids seem to have evolved several different times. We have the true whip scorpions and the vinegaroons, but we actually have two more whip scorpions. This next arachnid is one I'm almost certain, or you are one of like 3 people I know. This is the short-tailed whip scorpion, better known as the arachnid order Schizomyia. What that's for, we don't know. They're these weird, obscure leaf litter dwellers that are only found in small pockets of tropical and subtropical habitat. What we do know is they don't have eyes, so they're hunting entirely by, and we think they're using those claw-like pedipalps. Not many people have seen them eating, but we do think they're predators of vinegaroons. But if you look at the morphology of a vinegaroon and a schizomydon, you have either giant vinegaroon or ant-sized schizomydon. So it stands to reason that they're probably separate groups. But again, like I said, very few people are studying schizomydon. Very little is known about them. And it's one of those things where if you see one, count your lucky stars, because they are wild. And it's one of those things where every time we see them, if you're sifting through leaves or flipping rock, weird 8-legged ant, take a closer look and record the observations you have, because has ever seen in our history. history. We know even less about the next one. These are the microwhip scorpions, not to be confused with tardigrades, which are not an arachnid at all. Palpagrades are weird. In fact, I don't think at all, except for the video that was shot by my buddy Mikey from Cool Critters, so in human history. These guys are tiny, so they are difficult as heck to film, even with the best of cameras. And because they don't survive very well, studying them in captivity has proven to be almost impossible. They only show up in obscure pockets, which is already difficult to access. And two, virtually nothing is known about them. Cyanobacteria in their habitat, but the way they move, or at least omnivores. The fun thing about palpagrades, because nobody can speak to them with confidence. I have yet to actually even see them in the wild myself. It's one of the few arachnids I'm missing, but because nobody sees them, when people do find them. In fact, we're not even sure what their entire range is. There's an off chance it's a brand new species that no one's seen before. Extra creepy springtail mixed with a mice. They seem to only understand their world through vibration and chemical signal that probably comes through their tail. See how it's lined with all kinds of little hairs? But a long, thin tail with lots of hairs poking out of it. Exactly how they're using it and exactly what it's used for. But I'm hoping that more people will do some studies on palpagrades. We only have 3 more arachnids. I want to look at the one that I think is most terrifying, and that is the camel spider. But these guys are neither camels nor are they spiders. They're their own thing. They come from the order Solifugae and are called solifuges, and they seem to be desert and occasionally rainforest dwellers. Like a lot of the other arachnids, we don't know a ton about their biology. These guys are voracious predators. And I mean voracious. These things, and I think the way they eat is what makes them so unsettling, and they find them terrifying. They're big, they're fast, but people will also claim that they chase them. What's really happening is they're running towards your shadow to get shade from the sun. I can understand why you might be terrified. They have these like Frankenstein arms as they run around food, and when they're mad, they look horrifying. Opens up showing these serrated horror, and these guys can give you one heck of a bite. That camel spiders are incredibly venomous. There was one report out of somewhere in Asia on a camel spider with venom glands, but there was no, and studies of that same species since then have not been able to replicate me remotely resembling a venom. But the solifuge order is not thought to be venomous, but it's not dangerous. Unless, of course, you're an insect, will be the end of your life. But it's not as humane as prey. Long before the animal starts to feel spider. These guys run around super fast at prey, and then they basically just grind it alive. Their terrifying chelicerae kind of work like a blorth, grinding their food into a paste. Their stomachs are very simple and just kind of suck things through before it's in their digestive system. The camel spider's solution to that being insects with their terrifying chelicerae. And camel spiders eat more than just insects, possibly even small mice. So, just food for home that are being pureed alive to feed these thin ones. This next arachnid is known as the hooded tick spider, as they look sort of spider-hooded, because they come from the order Rhizonuli, and they are pretty much only in the tropics of the Americas. They're not encountered by people very often at all. One neat fact about them is, like scorpions, they fluoresce under UV, but we're not totally sure. As you're going to see in a second, arachnid and chelicerate taxonomy is kind of a mess. But Rhizonuli get even cooler than that. This is the only arachnid that was not initially discovered with live specimens in the wild. Our first Rhizonulid specimens were fossils, and they were thought to be an extinct group, until eventually somebody found a living one in the wild. Similar to things like coelacanths and pelican spiders, the Rhizonuli are actually sort of living fossils too. And to this day, very little is known about their biology. We're pretty sure they're predators, eating other small arthropods in the leaf litter of the rainforest they call home. But very few observations of them eating anything in the wild actually exist. So we can't really speak with great confidence about their diet, their habits, or really anything about them. Much like the Schizomida and palpigrades, these are among those arachnids where every time we see them, there's a chance to discover something new about their really secretive lifestyle. And due to the challenging habitats they call home, actually finding them is a bit of a task in and of itself. So, for now, the world of the Rhizonuli still remains a mystery. But that brings us to our final arachnid. Probably the creature you did not expect to be on this list, and I even blurred its silhouette on here so it didn't spoil the surprise. But here it is. Yep. Horseshoe crabs are arachnids. They're not crabs at all. In fact, crabs are closer to crabs. Horseshoe crabs are just called horseshoe crabs because they're loosely horseshoe shaped and they're big arthropods with claws, and so calling them a crab is a pretty easy. They have 8 legs, they have 2 pedipalps, they have claw-like mouthparts, chelicerae, and they have 2 body segments, a prosoma and an epistoma within chelicerate taxonomy. Are they out? That's been a debate for a long time, but a study from this genetics actually puts them not only inside the arachnid clade, but weirdly newly. That is their closest living when you compare the two of them next to my mind. It was actually a life-changing thing. Wild, wild stuff. When I was telling my girlfriend to her reaction finding out that Dan and Phil had actually been a couple for years while making it is the largest arachnid on Earth is no longer from arachnid, but horseshoe crabs get a heck of a lot bigger than even your largest tarantulas. So your largest arachnid is actually because they're kind of a living fossil in their own of years, sort of like scorpions. The fact that they have thousands of species, but because they live all over. These guys are just super rugged survivors. They're eating soft-bodied mollusks and things that live on the ocean. It is almost as terrifying as the crab stuff, and push it through these bristles that line the underside of their body. And those bristles serve as alive as their chelicerae just push them in, and partially due to their solid food. So once their soft-bodied prey is all chewed up by their left, are all digestible for their unique digestive systems. A unique opportunity as well, because even people who crabs, there's something captivating and mystifying about any oceanic bugs. I was into fish and sharks, and I told myself as like a 3-year-old I wanted to be a marine biologist, and reptiles and amphibian life in our backyards, the full of life that is just so different than we are. And I'm phobic to maybe see arachnids in a little bit of a different way. Throughout life's history on Earth, there have been a lot of that. And these horseshoe crabs are one of the arachnids that have been with us for the longest time. So rather than seeing arachnids as something to learn from, something to appreciate, and something remarkable and special about the world we live in. But arachnids aren't the only creatures that are absolutely everywhere. There might be 100,000 plus known arachnid species, but there are over 1 million known insects. And if you want to find out which ones might be lurking near you right now, check out this video right here. Hope to see you there, but until next time, don't forget to get outside and find your own adventure.